from Crow Nation as an educator at the Little Bighorn College, assisting with language and culture resource development at the college and through the Language Consortium. And yeah, it's kind enough to join us here today. And hopefully we'll have a chance to share some of the awesome stuff that the Language Consortium has been developing in the last few years.
So I think you can hear me. Let me just give you some background to our work while this is still grinding here. In about 2011, we sent about 8 Crow Indian language teachers to a language institute that was held over at Standing Rock College. And at that time, they were very impressed with the work that was being done in the Dakota language there. And so they went there one year, and when they came back, or one summer, and they came back, and their school administrators all called up and came to Little Bighorn College and said, we absolutely have to have Crow Summer Institute here. We can't be going to the Lakota Language Institute. So we decided to start in 2011, our very first Crow Summer Institute. At Crow, we have many schools serving the Crow children. We have Catholic schools, one at St. Xavier along the Bighorn River, and one in Pryor that's called St. Charles. And then we have public schools at Pryor, at Wyola, at Lodgegrass, at Crow Agency, and of course in Hardin. And so it's what's happened is over since 2011, right up to 2014, we kept doing teacher training opportunities together. And we decided to form a 501c3 nonprofit called the Crow Language Consortium. So it's a partnership of educational institutions, schools and the college, but also there's activists, there's individual teachers of Crow language classrooms, and persons like myself. Now I'm retired, but I'm an adjunct faculty, but there are superintendents and principals. Anyway, it's activists, individuals, also schools and the college, kind of a mixed group who care deeply about the Crow language and language revitalization. So,
Janine, you need to be facing your computer so we can hear you.
Okay. So also we had the opportunity to meet the people from the Language Conservancy in 2011. We were able to, from a relative of ours that lives in Indiana, Bloomington, meet up with the Language Conservancy, who's been working with especially the Dakota Language Consortium, but many other language consortia. And we went around to all of our school districts to meet with parents and with students, and talking about the need for the Crow language revitalization. And in every location, every school district, we were able to receive tremendous amount of encouragement to begin to develop materials, train teachers, and participate together to work on language revitalization. So that's when we decided to form our consortium. We are in the process of, now you see, I spent all afternoon putting these slides together, and Oh, this is so frustrating. I apologize to you. I can't even believe this is occurring. I'm usually actually quite efficient. Spend most of my life on Zoom. And so
Janine,
there you
is there
go.
any way that, Janine, is there any way that you could email your presentation to Matt or myself or Joan, and then we could present it from our screens?
Well, that's possible if I can keep my laptop going long enough to get that
Absolutely,
done.
you sure could. You'll just have to tell one of us when to advance the slides.
Well, we can give that a try. Let me see now.
I'll bet you have Matt's email handy.
I do. I certainly do.
Then you don't have to write down mine.
Okay, let's see. And now my camera's on, but now it's gone off again. Okay, let's see. Well,
Can you see that?
yes. This may be somewhat older version of the slides I had prepared, but no problem. We've had a number of initiatives, and I thought just to be able to show these to you would give you an idea of the type of work that the people in our schools have done. So if you want to advance the slide. So in 2011, we surveyed our children that were in Head Start. We had 304 children in Head Start, and we assessed them. Their teachers talked to them and determined a level of fluency in the Crow language. And you can take a look at this. In the first column is fluency, that's yellow. And then we have limited fluency, that's a second column. And then we have understanding, middle column, and limited understanding, that's a fourth column, and no knowledge. So what's really important to notice is that about 11% of the children, or 3.2% of the children ages 5, you know how Head Start is, ages 3, 4, and 5, 3.2% were fluent. And then limited fluency was 13.8%, understanding was 18%, limited understanding 28%, but no understanding at all 35%. This is really, really shocking to the Crows because, you know, we have taken such pride in our fluency, and over age 35, there are something like 4,000 speakers. So knowing that our language is collapsing among our youngest children was really an important thing for us to know. I'm sure all of you know where the Crow Reservation is located, but in the event you don't, we're in South Central Montana, and all of our schools are all around the reservation. You can see in the west is Pryor. In the middle, along the Bighorn River Valley, is St. Xavier and Fort Smith. St. Xavier is a Catholic school. It's called Pretty Eagle School. And Fort Smith has a small public school. Going back to Pryor, there's 2 schools. St. Charles is a Catholic academy administered by St. Lebray. And there's also a public school at Pryor, including the high school, Plentycoos. You've, I'm sure, heard of Plentycoos. And moving to the far east sector, Hardin is where Hardin Public Schools educate 75% of all the children on the reservation. Our heaviest populated districts are Black Lodge and Reno districts. That's around Crow Agency, between Crow Agency and Hardin. So Hardin has an intermediate, elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school. And then in Crow Agency, there's a public school that's administered by Hardin. Then going south in Lodgegrass, there's a public school there that's a Class B school. And Wyola is a K-8 that's in our southeast sector. So you can move to the next slide. Oh, you see, it's not even showing some of what is there. Anyway, so on the very first slide, there are 14 classrooms who since 2014 up to today, 2024, are dual language immersion. 14 classrooms among all of those, especially their pre-K through second or third grade. We have a full-time language immersion classroom in Lodgegrass, Montana at the Catholic Church that is supported and run by the St. Labray Educational Board. We also have in the upper grades from 4th grade to 12th grade, we have daily language classes being offered in most, if not all, of our schools. And that's what this is supposed to represent, but a lot of the graphic there doesn't appear. We have 24 Class 7 people on our reservation, and we're working hard to maybe double that number by the end of this summer. So you can move to the next slide. One of the major teachers of our language, of course, is Little Bighorn College. We have courses in the Crow language. We have Crow Language 1 and 2. We have Conversational Crow, and we have Plains Indian Sign Language. Those are the language courses that we have. As well, we have an Associate of Arts degree in the Crow Studies. And there are several of those courses that are taught almost entirely in the Crow language. They're in bold print, of course, the language courses you can see, and then Plains Indian Sign Language, then moving down to Crow Studies 134, Music and Dance of the Crow Indians, and then at the very bottom, Crow Studies 137, The Horse in Crow Indian History and Culture. So for 3 years, we did have a language immersion school at the college. We received an NA grant, and I served as principal of that language immersion school. So we started with kindergarten, and here are the people, the staff that assisted us, Vince Crooked Arm and Nyla Bullenside and Lisa White-Clay. And then Frederica Left Hand was the assistant director. You can go ahead and move. We had the grant from 17 to 20. And so it's been a number of years back, but the kids that enrolled in language immersion were there all 3 years, and they really acquired quite a capability in the Crow language. So you can see some of the children here. They had a weather station. We had awards. We have big posters that were on the wall, but these posters are in all the dual language immersion classrooms all throughout the reservation. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Just more classroom scenes. We went to the library frequently with the kids, and our librarian did activities with the children. So you can advance again. We were very involved with the gardening project, as well as are the Crow school students in the youngest grades. Little Bighorn College has a garden project for families and elders, and this is just scenes from that gardening facility here in Crow Agency. And of course, our students went over there frequently during the summer. We were able to have a van with our language immersion school, and we traveled to historic sites on our reservation. These are photos of the Plenty Coups State Park. The children spent 2 days, one day, 1 year, and then the following year. And the log building in the middle is the home of Chief Plenty Coups, and then they have a teepee pitched, and there are displays. There's a lot of it's a beautiful park area. There's also a spring near his home that has some of the best water in the countryside. So the children learned all of this with their teachers. They learned all about Chief Plenty Coups and the state park. We also took them to the Little Bighorn battlefield, and we were able to walk the grounds and understand the history. The children got really, really into the various important figures in the battle. And of course, the Crows were scouts for Custer, so they learned the names of the scouts. You can advance that. We also had the children learning native games and playing every recess. They were playing native games, so they became very familiar with all of the games that Scott Flatmouth taught to us, Flatlip. Yeah. In coordination with the Language Immersion School, Little Bighorn College started a family night for language activities. And so we were very happy to have Jennifer Flatlip join us, and she taught us and she had many kinds of lessons. During the 3 years of our language immersion school, we had monthly family meetings, and we helped them take activity packs home so that they could practice certain kinds of vocabulary with their children, and also play some games and do some exercises of, using the language. We were hoping to promote that the families would use the language in their homes. So this is the 6th annual CSA, which would have been in 2018. And there's, we have a cultural center on Little Bighorn College campus, and these are our students in the Crow Summer Institute. As we're beginning one morning, we always have a morning assembly, and then the teachers will go to their various workshops and classes, mainly for materials development. Here's some more scenes from our Crow Summer Institute. We have in the upper left, we were working with an advanced Crow language class and using manipulative. So we had all kinds of small animals of the plains that people were using in building sentences and exchanging those around the room. These are some of in the middle, some of the conversations that are like, you might say, funny books that are in their worksheets for learning conversations. In the upper right, there's the whole planning for the classroom, making, big language boards for the classroom. And we had several Crow language levels studying the language for the adults that are working with the children. So you can advance the slide. This is a bit about the Language Consortium. We're organized in a 501c3 with partners of the schools and the college. And our board of directors is myself, Jason Cummins, Curtis Yarlett, Roanne Alden, Father Randolph Reisig, Will Maya, and John Boyle, who are linguists. Our mission, and this is kind of a powerful statement, we believe that the Crow language has an inherent right to exist, that it is a fundamental and irreplaceable facet of the Crow people's cultural and humanities linguistic heritage. We are dedicated to restore the threatened Crow language to stability and health, and document the benefits of language recovery to the Indigenous Crow Indian community and individuals. And some of the projects are listed here, but we're going to go over them. I have them represented in the images that follow. So we have here some of the materials that we have developed during the Crow Summer Institute. On the upper left, we have a poster that's about all the things in the classroom. And so there's about 20 terms for things that you'd find in a classroom in like Crow School. We have 10 posters on the Crow language with vocabulary sets. We have specific illustrations that are about the Crows. For example, all of the riding gear that are used by the Crow horses are on a series of 2 posters. We have 3 levels of textbooks that develop about a vocabulary of about 1,000 words per level. And in the lower left, you can see all of it says the Crow countryside. And so all of the trees and shrubs, the creek and all of that is written in Crow language. To match each one of our level textbooks, we have flashcards, and we have an online Crow vocabulary builder where students can practice their vocabulary and hear the words said back to them, and they can repeat. On the lower right there, Anna D. Crane is recording for our upcoming dictionary project, so you can advance it. Here are the covers of our 3 levels of textbooks, and these are used from grades 1 to 5. We also have a series of 15 classroom text or picture books, and they're all in the Crow language. No, it's for the immersion classroom. They're being used all across all of our schools, especially in those dual immersion language classrooms. Dual immersion is where the teachers segment about half of their class during the day in all subjects to be in Crow, and the other half will be in English, and then they'll switch them. So it's up to the teacher how often they want to switch, but in theory, about half the teaching day is in the Crow language, no matter what the subject, whether it's math or science, and so on like that. So that's what dual immersion is about. You can advance it. Here are some of more of our posters. We have one called My Face, and here's the parade horse. This is a favorite. In fact, many families have ordered these posters for their home because there's certain gear on the left side of the horse and certain gear on the right side of the horse. If you ever come to Crow Fair, you'll know that the people are very good students of how all of the trappings on the horse belong. Also, the one on the right, the poster is My Family. My family. We have these on an online bookstore so people can order them whenever they're ready to have them for their classrooms. Now, this section of my presentation is about our rapid word collection project, our dictionary project, which the main amount of word collection was done in July of 2018. And so here are scenes of the main group that in the lower center, that's the main group at Crow Agency. Our youngest person was in her 30s, and our eldest person was in their mid-80s. We had about 75 people who helped us one day or maybe all 2 weeks. We honored all of the participants with an honorarium, and every day we were given, and this is how this works. We were given what's called a word association packet. And the word association means that, for example, everything to do with hand, that file would go to a group of the people that came for the Rapid Word Consortium. So roll it to the very next slide. And every group would spend 20 minutes on like hand or the branch of a tree or the term injury. And they would think of every single word associated with hand and make a list of those words, agree upon them, and then read them into a recording and enter them into a computer. Of course, the Crow language has been written since 1973, and the people that have come to this rapid word collection were almost all very, well, certainly they were all fluent, but many were illiterate. So they were all recording, and you can see in the lower left, there were ladies, and ladies chose to be in groups with ladies of 4, and men chose to be in groups with men. Now, that was their own choice. We didn't know. But when it came time to get to work, each of the groups took 20 of these folders, and they would record as many words as they knew in the group associated with hand or clothing or sewing or, you know, any of these kinds of things. And there's 1,800 domains or word associations that prompts people's knowledge of the language. Every day, we recorded how many words each group came in with their files, and it was very exciting. Our rapid word collection goal was 10,000 words in 10 days. But the good news is that in 10 days, we collected 15,000 words. That was really knock your socks off exciting. Okay, scroll to the next. We have been very fortunate to have so much cooperation from all these many people in Crow Indian people in putting our dictionary together and gathering all these words. You might say capturing all these words. And we have now an online dictionary. And if you want to see it, you can go to crowlanguage.org. So up in your Google search, you enter crowlanguage.org. And we also have now, about a year and a half later, we have a printed Crow dictionary with 11,000 entries. So you can go on past that. You've already, I'm not sure why that slide is there. Is that the end of it?
Yeah, that was the last one there.
Oh, no, shoot. Well, I'll have to just tell you some more about it. We are now publishing a children's dictionary that has 4,000 entries. And we received advice from our own membership, the teachers of Crow language, and in choosing the 4,000 words for the children's dictionary. We've also been able to receive a grant called Wisdom of the Children. And for Wisdom of the Children, our teachers were retained in a workshop to develop games that would use the Crow language. And so, for example, one of our teachers invented with her father, the teacher is Nicole Reelbird, and her father is Charlie Reelbird, who's now passed away. But at the time, they collaborated on this, and they called it the color of horses. So they made a chart that used the color of all of the colors of horses, where the family could have that chart on the wall and learn the color of horses. And then they invented a game, and it's a game much like Chutes and Ladders. And so you use a horse, a small miniature horse, to take your steps by rolling a dice. And then you learn all the places that a horse goes in the entire year, like to the pasture, to the barn, to the crow fair, to the racetrack, and so on. But you have to roll the dice to take the steps and go through the entire year with the horse. And so you learn all this vocabulary. And it was so exciting. Our Wisdom of the Children had family evenings where if you brought your entire family, and you have to sit down at a table to play the game. And if you play the game, then you receive the game in a packet or in a tote bag, and you take that game home and play it with one another around the kitchen table. So we ended up, we started out with about 8 games. 3 of the games were based on our lullabies. Now, the Crows have we've now recorded something like 38 lullabies, but we chose 3 of our lullabies to create games. And we were able to have an entire evening learning lullabies. And on this particular evening, we had about 80 of our 80 family members, but I would say that represents about 25 families. We even had a 5-generation family who attended, and the entire throng were singing the lullabies. There's one about a little beaver. There's one about an izugada, a mouse. There's one about a little rabbit. And there's an elder who wanted to add in the Plains Indian Sign Language with the lullaby. And so all of us were singing and practicing the lullabies. And then we had the children put together singing teams. And so the children were practicing the lullabies, and then they competed against one another. And by applause, the crowd, the entire crowd, chose the group of kids, 4 or 5, who sang the best in a particular lullaby. And then we did it with the other 2. It was one of the most exciting evenings that we've ever had together. And then each lullaby was recorded on a zip drive, and the family went home with their zip drive in hand. It was just an exciting evening. The following summer, the idea of games really took off. So our Crow Summer Institute, we had a full week where 23 of our teachers developed games that could be used by families. So we had one teacher developed all of the uses of the buffalo and had a game that was developed in, I think she had some sort of a spinning wheel, and she had cards. You know, they all got very interesting. And so by the end of the week, we had 23 games that were designed, and we hired a person that is excellent in artwork to give consultation on the colors and the forms and the boards. And so each one of these games was put in a little tote bag. And when parents came to our nights and they took part in playing a game with the host teacher who invented it, they got to take a game home with them. So we've distributed literally hundreds of games into our families, and each one of these games delivers about 20 vocabulary words in the Crow language. And most of our parents are fluent or semi-fluent in the Crow language, so they can put lots more Crow language into these games. Then another grant that we were able to get was called the Natural World Book Series. In this series of books, what we did to begin with is to retain an elder to tell us a story that they wanted children to know. Well, we retained 8 elders, and we selected 4 after we recorded the stories and so on. And we decided then to render their story into about a 3rd grade level telling of the story. And so we had, for example, the creation story, and we retained an illustrator named Janine Pease, who then illustrated the story. And we retained a 3rd grade teacher, Nicole Rilbert, to translate to transcribe the story into 3rd grade level Crow. And then we derived science lessons from that story. So the book has the telling of the story with the illustrations, and they're in beautiful color, in showing the traditional story. And then in the back half of the book are several science lessons that derive from the creation story. Like there's our creation story involves Old Man Coyote, who is sending ducks down into the water to get mud in their beak. And the ducks, there's several different ducks that try to go. And finally, the duck that comes up with mud in his beak forms the world. So there's a lesson on ducks. And then there's a lesson on water. And so then there's a lesson on the earth. So we were able to tell a traditional story featuring an elder, telling it in the Crow language in about 3rd grade level Crow. And then we have 3 science lessons. So it's actually a science book. It's used during the science part of, the teacher's curriculum. So that was a very interesting effort to bring the curriculum, the traditional stories, into the science classroom. This past 3 years, the Hardin schools have worked on curriculum that has 2 major parts to it. The first is called a heroes curriculum. And they are heroes under 40, Crow Indian people who are 40 and younger, who have achieved great things in all kinds of areas. Maybe they're artists or fashion designers, rap artists, a teacher, an engineer, an architect. And so all of these, I think there's 30 of them in the Heroes series. They're biographies of these people, Crow Indian people, both men and women. And they are made into books that are then taken into the classroom, and they are all in the Crow language. And then the second part of it is a Crow history timeline. And so there are major points in the historic development of the Crow people that are written about. And then in these booklets, in 10 booklets, these different eras are written about where the Crows were, what was going on then, what were some of the achievements, what were some of the challenges. And so this will go into the social studies and history classroom. So we're very excited about that series, the one on heroes and the one on the Crow historical timeline. So those are some of the things that I'd like to share with you today. And I'm sorry we had such technical difficulties. So maybe if you have any quick questions, we can or I can field some questions.
I'll jump in with a little quick one. Hopefully other people can think of something, but in your experience teaching the language, often we kind of run into kind of funny experiences with the language, like mistranslating things, or this word in Crow kind of sounds like this word in English. Do you have any funny stories or jokes that kind of pop up that you like to tell kids, or I don't know?
One of the things about me, Matt, is that I'm an administrator and I also go after the funding and I look after organizing. So I'm not on the working end of the teaching of the language. And our teachers, when they're inventing these lessons and working on the curriculum, are usually doing it in at least groups of 5, if not 25. And I know they spend a great deal of time laughing and talking and really testing the materials out. And we also do bench test all of our materials. So I'm not going to be able to come up with one of those kind of stories. Sorry.
I'll ask a question, and thanks for your presentation. I guess, if there's others who are on this webinar and listening to kind of some of the funding that you got to support the language work that you've done, any advice you have for them, maybe if they're coming away from this with ideas for looking for grants?
We've had so many different agencies that have contributed. Of course, almost everything is highly competitive. So getting in on the writing the grants is one thing that you really need a very fine grant writer, and you've got to do your research on what the condition of your language, what your needs are for materials, and what makes your particular approach to teaching language unique. We have been able to receive a number of administration for Native Americans grants, and especially our materials development in our dictionary. Also, the Montana Indian Languages Project, we have been able to rely on MILP for the development of our dictionary and especially our children's dictionary. And because MILP is very much about materials development, and you know, none of our grants have paid for actual teachers. Our schools support all of those teachers and all of those classrooms. So our language consortium is very busy developing materials. So that's what we're looking for, is materials funding. The Montana Humanities Montana has supported a number of our CSI projects for the summer training. So we've really been able to. We've got a Department of Education grant as well for language development. You name it, you know. But none of what we've done has been cheap or inexpensive. I mean, our dictionary probably is going to come to a total of $450,000, all said and done. From the time we invited our elders, we paid them a very respectful honorarium. We had all of the entry of the materials. We had a series of linguists who developed not only, you know, entering the words, but we also had to, in many with many words, we had to re-record them, because if you go to our dictionary, you can not only see the written word, but you can click on a woman's voice and hear a woman's voice, and click another little speaker for a man's voice. And all of that has all kinds of technology that is, you know, you've got to pay, you know, to get that established. And so not only that, we wanted to have trainings with the dictionary. And so to have our training sessions, our CSI always has, we retain teachers. We're often interested to provide honorarium to our teachers so that they can afford to come, you know, drive from, you know, if you come from Pryor, it's 85 miles. If you come from Wyola, it's 45 miles. And you have to get a babysitter for your kids, and you know, all of this. So we try to be very very respectful and thoughtful of our teachers when they come, and so all of that is the sort of, those are the sorts of costs that we look for in a grant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thanks again for Janine's presentation, for your time and consideration for us all here.
Thank you for
Very,
inviting me.
absolutely, and thanks for everyone for sticking with us through technical issues.
Difficulties and issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience.
Please remember to check the chat for the survey. The link